Next, let's go to Midway, where Jerry has a question about the executive branch's powers. Jerry, you're on the line.
Yeah, Senator, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jerry White. We talked quite a few times before. Anyway, I had asked a question about the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act of 1946. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I'm familiar with the APA. Thank you, Jerry.
Can you tell me, since my understanding is it gives the executive branch the ability to write, execute, and judge their own laws, can you tell me why we haven't repealed or modified that?
Okay, thank you
It
for
comes from legislature. It comes from the bill.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that question, Jerry. Okay, so the APA itself doesn't give authority to the executive branch to write law as much as it does set up the standards by which executive branch regulations may be challenged in court, and the process that has to be used before an executive branch agency, having been delegated authority from Congress, can issue a new regulatory pronouncement. So it itself is not the source of the delegation of authority, but it's a system. It provides a legislative framework through which federal regulations are issued. But you're correct, Jerry, to raise the concern that this is yet one of many parts of a big hole within federal law. It makes it possible, makes it far too easy, in fact, for way too much of our law to be written by the executive branch. As you point out, it's supposed to be Congress, which is the legislative branch of the federal government, that makes our law. And instead, what we see today is something very, very different than that. I have in my office a series of bookcases that demonstrate in very real, very graphic terms what exactly is happening here. In these bookcases, I have 80,000 pages of new regulations that were issued last year in 2013 alone. 80,000 pages. On top of that bookcase, I have a very small stack of 800 pages of legislation that was actually passed by Congress last year. So you've got 800 pages of statute passed by Congress, the body authorized by the Constitution to make law, and then you've got 80,000 pages of regulatory text by the executive branch, which itself on its own is not supposed to have the power to make law. So that means measured by volume, measured by pages, this is 100 times the volume of text being put out by the executive branch. This is a big problem. It all results...
Who gave the executive branch the legal authority to do that?
Congress over time has, in increments, step by step, in bill after bill, in law after law, has ceded little bits of this authority. So they'll pass one law that deals with cleaning up the water, another bill that deals with cleaning up the air, and they'll pass a very broad pronouncement. For instance, in the Clean Air Act, it'll be something along the lines of, we shall have clean air. It shall be unlawful to pollute the air. And we hereby confer to the Environmental Protection Agency the power to make and enforce rules carrying the force of generally applicable law that will implement these standards. The problem with this is that these end up becoming laws unto themselves. So this is a complex problem because this involves hundreds of thousands of pages of regulatory text that are now in force. Fortunately, Jerry, there is a relatively simple solution. That solution involves a legislative proposal on which I'm an original co-sponsor with my friend Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. It's called the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S. And what it says is that each time an executive branch agency produces a new major rule, a new major regulation that has a significant economic impact, it won't take effect unless or until both houses of Congress have passed it into law and passed it on to the president for the president's signature. Only at that point would those regulations be able to become law. Here's why that matters, Jerry. It's in addition to the fact that it's unconstitutional for us to operate like that, even though it's unconstitutional in a way that the courts won't necessarily address, it ends up costing the American people a lot more money. You see, the heavy costs, the heavy compliance burden associated with these regulations end up getting passed downstream, down to ordinary hardworking consumers across Utah and throughout America, who end up paying higher prices for goods and services And they also end up paying for those regulations in terms of diminished wages and higher unemployment. That's bad for Americans. The important feature here to remember is that it's not necessarily that Congress always makes great laws. It's that members of Congress, if they pass laws that kill jobs, can be fired in 2-year increments in the case of congressmen and in 6-year increments in case of senators. And that's why we need to pass the REINS Act.